In the history of the Imperium, there exist forces whose origin is shrouded in darkness and whose true aims remain hidden even from those who call them allies. Forces whose actions do not conform to the conventional tenets of warfare and loyalty, yet whose influence is felt where battles reach the zenith of brutality. Their name is spoken rarely and with caution, as if the mere memory of them provokes unease, for each mention carries too many questions to which no one is eager to provide answers. In the archives of the Inquisition, amidst snippets of data and incinerated reports, there are sporadic references to a military organization operating with the permission of the highest authorities of Terra, yet simultaneously defying the usual hierarchies of the Adeptus Astartes. The dossiers on these warriors are destroyed and rewritten anew, with some sources calling them heroes and others executioners so merciless that their methods can scarcely be distinguished from those they combat. Imperial fleet encounters with them have resulted in reports filled with contradictions. Some captains wrote of sudden support arriving at a time of need. Others recounted how these mysterious Astartes themselves turned allied garrisons to ash, not bothering with explanations. Their strikes were always swift and relentless, and their motives remain a subject of speculation even for the most seasoned investigators. There is reason to believe that they belong to what is known as the Cursed Founding, those rare experiments created in an age of instability, whose origins were meticulously concealed. Unlike their other cursed brethren, they have neither disappeared nor faded into oblivion. On the contrary, their presence is felt at key junctures of the Imperium's wars, yet always as if they act not for glory but for another purpose hidden from prying eyes. Those few who have encountered them face to face noted their unyielding dedication, so fanatical that it seemed almost pathological. But behind this loyalty lay another trait, utter disdain for outsiders, including even brothers from other Space Marine chapters. Their fury in combat was directed not only against Xenos or heretics. At times they turned it against those whom they should, by all rights, consider allies. Amidst other Astartes, whose glory is etched into the chronicles of millennia, these warriors appear almost like ghosts. No own fortresses, monasteries, no open alliances, no grand speeches, only brief, brutal campaigns and silent glimpses of their incursions into the history of the Imperium. It is difficult to say who guides their hand, the High Lords of Terra, or darker forces that prefer to remain in the shadows. But one thing is clear: wherever they appear, they leave behind only ruins, fear, and rumours. These rumours have grown into legends. Some claimed they exist solely as an instrument of vengeance, a hammer descending at the Emperor's command. Others that they follow their own unfathomable codes. Some doubted their human nature entirely, believing that they were the product of secret experiments meant to surpass even the first Space Marines. And for that reason, whenever a new fragment of information about them fell into the hands of knowledge seekers, it was treated with particular attention. Even a random info crystal or a scrap of a report could prove to be a key to uncovering their nature. Such was the case this time, in the silent depths of the Homungu Nebula, where a battle barge emerged from the warp after a conflict. It was hard to imagine a more inhospitable refuge for a vessel riddled with a dozen breaches and a malfunctioning Geller field generator. Nevertheless, this graveyard of starships provided extensive resources for the necessary repairs. Having endured a sudden onslaught, the furious Adra Malek gathered a dozen cultists and set out to scour the ship's decks in search of any surviving slaves, enemy Astartes, and uninvited intruders. He inscribed ritual wards around the edges of the breaches to prevent the unborn from entering the ship. There was no sign of Shut de Mela. The enemy had obliterated his mechanism, forcing Adram Malek to employ his powers to seal a volatile portal within the engine room. Just as he completed the task, a server skull emerged, delivering an info crystal to the word-bearer. It appeared that the tech priest had met a grim fate. The device contained intelligence regarding yet another chapter from the Cursed Founding, the Minotaurs. As he examined the writing, Adram Malek unfurled a parchment and began inscribing it meticulously. The Minotaurs are a fiercely loyal chapter of Space Marines, notorious for their profound hatred of Xenos, which exceeds even Imperial norms. They seldom collaborate with other Astartes, and when they do, they exhibit open disdain, often resulting in conflicts within their ranks or with local forces. Their reputation as unreliable allies has led even the most intrepid Imperial commanders to hesitate before aligning with them. Imperial records note that they were included among the cursed founding, but whether this chapter is the same as the original or has been reconstituted after the dissolution of the first remains uncertain. Information regarding their past is safeguarded under such stringent secrecy that even the Inquisition is denied access. However, fragments of information have managed to seep through. Several surviving records indicate that the chapter's gene seed has been labeled as chimeric, implying that it was derived from a forbidden source, mingled with heretical genetic material, falsified, or somehow altered during its creation. It is highly probable that the uncontrollable combat rage displayed by the Minotaurs is a result of a specific curse within their blood. Chimeras, mused Adram Malik. What madness must have gripped the mind of the one who dared to create such beings? It would be intriguing to gaze into their souls. Since the mid-38th millennium, the Minotaurs have vanished from Imperial records, their deeds and honors obscured or erased by a series of decrees and data purges. When the chapter re-emerged millennia later, it was noted that they responded swiftly and unhesitatingly to a call to arms from the High Lords of Terra. The Minotaurs embellish their armor and iconography with markings that denote rank and achievements. Many symbols remain inscrutable to outsiders, though it is believed that the numbering and color coding of lambda symbols indicate the number of kills or worthy opponents defeated in single combat. Initially, the chapter donned yellow power armor accented with red stripes, featuring a blue bull's head as their emblem. In the present day, however, the Minotaurs have transitioned to bronze armor, their heraldic symbol now depicting a red bull's head with downward curving black horns. The emblem of the tactical squad is prominently displayed on the left pauldron, in accordance with the Codex Astartes. While rank-and-file warriors do not mark their armor with company numbers, the elite veteran First Company displays a distinct variation of the symbol, a bronze bull's head against a dark red background. Although the Minotaurs adhere to the structure outlined in the Codex Astartes, they prefer to operate as a cohesive unit in warfare, rather than dispersing their forces to address minor threats. This strategy enables them to excel in siege warfare and in engagements against strong foes that can only be vanquished by overwhelming numbers. They show little hesitation in accepting significant casualties on the battlefield, with commanders often appearing less concerned for the well-being of their brethren until mission objectives are fulfilled. In addition to their willingness to sacrifice personnel, the Minotaurs benefit from two key advantages: a robust reserve of heavy weaponry and machinery. Their ranks boast rare models of Terminator armor, including Tartaros and Arcanan types, alongside relic vehicles exclusive to first founding chapters, such as Storm Eagle warships and ancient Spartan assault tanks. Among their ranks are the Contemptor-model dreadnoughts, which were considered cutting-edge even during the illustrious days of the Great Crusade. Their design incorporates systems inspired by the combat automata of the Legio Cybernetica, featuring compact reactors and force shield generators. During the Orphean War, the chapter deployed at least 10 of these formidable Contemptor dreadnoughts, indicating a significant reserve of such combat units within their arsenal. While dreadnoughts are revered as venerable warriors, the chapter regards them with a certain cold indifference. All Contemptors are referred to by the ancient term hecaton, which in the archaic Terran languages can signify giant, legion, or enslaved monster. Another notable aspect of the chapter is their unique approach to replenishing their personnel. Neophytes rapidly progress to become scouts, who in turn swiftly advance to initiates. This accelerated development is facilitated through psychoprogramming and cerebral surgery, enhancing the recruit's growth. Mental indoctrination continues until the neophyte is transformed into a brother Astartes. While these methods are not considered heretical, they are viewed as undesirable and can inflict significant physical and psychological trauma on the recruits. For such reckless practices, the chapter should have long been deemed renegades. Adram Malik paused, dipping his quill into the inkwell once again. They remind me of the World Eaters. They disregard losses and show no reverence for their venerable warriors. I would not be surprised if, in a fit of rage, they could not distinguish friend from foe. Yet the Imperium has found a way to harness them. Fascinating. In combat, the Minotaurs shun tactical maneuvers that do not facilitate swift engagement with the enemy. They charge headlong at their foes, and once their wrath subsides, they withdraw as abruptly as they arrived. Following their return at the onset of the 41st millennium, their tactics evolved. They now prefer to deploy vanguard forces to engage the enemy, encircle them, and cut off escape routes before unleashing the full might of their chapter upon the foe. While they maintain a high degree of autonomy, their fury is entirely subordinated to the structures of the imperial war machine. Many of the Minotaurs' operations are directed against other Astartes chapters, perhaps as a means of testing themselves against the most formidable adversaries they can find, their fellow Space Marines. Once they nearly entered open conflict with the Genesis chapter after deliberately insulting Marnius Calgar. The conflict was averted by the arrival of a fresh wave of orcs, but now the Ultramarines harbour deep resentment and refuse to fight alongside them. Malik felt the searing energy of the Empyrean flow through him, filling him with awe akin to gazing upon a life steeped in blood. There must be some compelling rationale wielded by the High Lords of Terra that allows them to maintain control over these berserkers. He tuned into the currents of the great ocean and took a fresh sheet of parchment, but then a sense of danger began to whisper in his ear. Adram Malik inscribed ritual wards around himself, closed his eyes, and stepped into the sacred realm. His psychic form navigated the corridors of the barge. One of the lower decks was filled with the anguished cries of souls who had been slaves aboard the ship just the day before. They were tormented by the unborn, striving to pull them into the seething nightmare of the Empyrean. Yet the slaves were unwilling to depart, fervently serving their master and pointing bony fingers towards an unknown destination. Focusing his mind, Adram Malik discerned two luminous figures, their auras ablaze with intense fire. "The Chimeras have managed to elude me." The sorcerer scrutinized one of them. "This one is special," he mused. "This one is blessed." He extended his hand, and the warrior felt a delicate touch upon his mind. Ophion had recently ascended to the ranks of the Minotaurs chapter, and the enforced mental indoctrination induced uncontrollable fits of aggression. Simultaneously, he felt a sense of confusion as he and Brother Norcrates cleared the deck of a heretical ship, igniting every cabin with burning promethium. The lower compartments resembled a maze filled with the screams of burning cultists. After hours of this, he stumbled upon a room adorned with figures of angels at the periphery. Scenes depicting Astartes' battles against Xenos and other threats to the Imperium decorated the walls, while in the center of the hall stood a small dais intended for a speaker or chronicler. An empty scroll lay there. Ophion struggled to grasp the purpose of this place. "It seems this is called a temple," he whispered. "Correct, Sidmur. This is indeed a temple." A voice floated into his mind, soft as the warm light of the spring sun. The voice enveloped his consciousness, and the warrior's fury gradually dissipated, replaced by a profound reverence inspired by the sublime. Before him materialized a figure radiant with light, adorned in golden armor, a masterpiece crafted with exceptional skill, encrusted with precious stones and metals. There was no suggestion of heaviness or ostentation, this being exemplified complete mastery over its essence. Ophion felt nothing but awe and sank to his knees. "This is the Temple of Knowledge," the voice resonated, not emanating from the figure, but reverberating from every direction, fading into a lingering echo in the Space Marine's mind. "Here I collect the deeds of humanity, for they must not fade from memory. Observe." He approached a shelf laden with scrolls, easily recognizing the heraldic symbols of the Firehawks, the Flame Falcons, the Mournival, the Sons of Antaeus, and numerous other chapters, yet the Minotaurs were conspicuously absent. "What about us?" he dared to inquire. Why is there nothing here concerning our legacy? Then write, the Golden Angel urged gently, gesturing toward the parchment. Ophion approached the lectern, removed his glove, and began inscribing each letter with care. I shall recount our first feat, the suppression of the rebellions during the 32nd millennium. Secret cults orchestrated a series of uprisings led by renegades from the Iron Warriors, Night Lords, and World Eaters. Planetary governments were brought to their knees and entire sectors were plunged into chaos for one Terran year. As the situation reached a critical juncture, the combined forces of the Adeptus Astartes emerged from the inky void beyond the spiral arm of the galaxy, unleashing punishing fire upon the enemy commanders. The system remained embroiled in local skirmishes for a considerable duration, quelled by the local armed forces. According to the Inquisition, the United Space Marine Forces were drawn from the chapters of the Carcharodons, Death Eagles, Angels of Purification, and the Minotaurs. Excellent, a commendable beginning, praised the Golden Spectre softly. However, I have encountered conflicting accounts that cast doubt on your involvement in suppressing the rebellions. Is this derived from the Inquisition's orders? Personally, I am new to the chapter, but it is traditionally believed that we were present, the Minotaur replied, continuing his writing. In the year 999 of the 37th millennium, during the 8th Black Crusade, the Andromax system fell under the control of the combined forces of the Iron Warriors and Night Lords, posing a significant threat to Terra's security. Initially, the Martian fabricator General Uxot declined to assist the loyal chapters in their fight against the traitors, but reversed his decision following a visit from the custodians to his forged temple. A few months later, the Minotaurs, alongside the combat maniples of the Mechanicus and the custodians of the Legio Custodes, obliterated the heretics from their fortified positions. This led to the suppression of the Macarian heresy and the F-sign incident. Thus, Ophion titled the military actions of the Minotaurs during the years 400 to 425 of the 41st millennium. After the demise of Lord Commander Solar Macarius, the worlds he had conquered descended into civil war. The High Lords were compelled to act decisively. They summoned several chapters to exterminate the heretics and restore order. The Minotaurs emerged as the sharpest blade, fracturing the empire of Lyrius from the 11th Armoured Regiment of Cadus. On the icy plains of Kiras Prime, their land raiders decimated the renowned tanks of the Cadus elite. They also executed the Exterminatus Order on the Hive World Duel and the Kingdoms of the Sword within the Hope Cluster. On the oceanic planet Nereus, the Minotaurs hunted down and eliminated the Xenos-possessed soldiers of the 4th Company of the Imperial Paladins within subterranean cave cities, but only after poisoning the seas of the once thriving Agri-world. The greatest dishonor the Minotaurs incurred during the Macarian heresy occurred when they nearly annihilated 2 Imperial chapters, the Doomed Warriors and the Initiates. Though allies during the Crusade, a matter of honor led to a confrontation in the Efsin system. With both chapters disregarding calls for a cessation of hostilities, the Minotaurs were dispatched to intervene. Regardless of the reasons behind the conflict or the potential righteousness of either side, the Minotaurs took the combatants by surprise, launching a full-scale assault on both factions. The Doomed Warriors quickly fled, while the Initiates found themselves cornered on Efsin, as most of their warships had been destroyed in orbit. The relentless and single-minded Minotaurs encircled this esteemed chapter, systematically dismantling it until they surrendered, leaving fewer than 100 survivors. In the aftermath, the Minotaurs claimed relics from the vanquished and appropriated the flagship of the fallen chapter as a trophy of war. Many were appalled that such ancient and esteemed descendants of the Ultramarines had been utterly exterminated with the tacit approval of the High Lords. For their actions, the Minotaurs were condemned throughout Ultramar and barred from crossing into the territories of the Lord of Macragge. Since that time, the sons of Guilliman have awaited an opportunity to exact vengeance upon the Minotaurs, as evidenced by the ensuing events in the defense of Hermetica. In the year 759 of the 41st millennium, the once thriving hive world of Hermetica, situated in the Misola segment, fell under siege from hordes of mutants led by the Word-Bearers, commanded by Lyak the Devourer. They emerged into the material realm aboard a space vessel known as the Nightmare Paradox. Responding to urgent calls for assistance, the Minotaurs deployed from orbit to sever the invading forces and launched an assault on the primary Chaos stronghold in Hive Kazabon, targeting the Basilica of St. Lysorius Ankareth. The Minotaurs obliterated everything in their path, unconcerned with the losses sustained by their heavy machinery. Their relentless advance proved unstoppable. They razed fortifications and drove the enemy back, along with thousands of trapped civilians desperate to escape the massacre. However, there was no safe haven. The cathedral was encircled and bombarded, with the towering spire under assault from the turbo lasers of Thunderhawk squadrons. At that moment, Terminators and assault squads charged into the fray. Master Asterion Moloch battled his way into the depths of the Basilica's catacombs, vanquishing Lyak's demon-possessed bodyguards and dealing a fatal blow to their master. However, the Dark Apostle, resembling a grotesquely mutated toad, used sorcery to escape into the warp. A vast sea of mutants continued to resist, but they were eventually contained until the arrival of the 17th Combat Group of the Imperial Guard from Necromunda, which purged the world of chaos corruption. Now, a silent space hulk drifts in a quarantine orbit at the outer reaches of the star system, having been battered by countless weapons, awaiting thorough examination by the Grey Knights and Martian tech priests. In the year 907 of the 33rd millennium, the Minotaurs dispatched 10 companies and 11 various vessels to aid the Loyalists during the Badab War. Operating independently in the southern region of the Maelstrom, they secured a series of significant victories, nearly annihilating the Separatists on Kiro and the Ravenworld while capturing the crucial planet of Vianje. They set new records for casualties in the battle for Badab Prime. However, it was the utter destruction of the Lamenters, chapter at Terra 5, that truly stained their reputation beyond the Civil War. The Lamenters' barge became inoperative, and the chapter suffered grievous losses, being heavily outnumbered and unable to escape. After a grueling battle, the Lamenters were compelled to surrender. The Minotaurs maintained control over the southern regions of the Maelstrom until the conclusion of the war. As new chapters joined the fray, they conducted several punitive campaigns against former rebel worlds, obliterating renegade outposts. They seized the Lamenters' barge, Daughter of the Storm, and several smaller vessels, departing the Maelstrom zone in the year 913 of the 33rd millennium, taking with them stocks of the gene seed from the sons of Sanguinius. In the year 989 of the 33rd millennium, the Minotaurs participated in operations to liberate the Crimson Fist's homeworld from an orc invasion. However, this engagement was short-lived, for within a year, the chapter shifted focus to pursue another enemy. The Night Reapers, operating at the edges of the Larn Rift, faced a penance crusade for their failures during the defense of Gamma's salvation in the Iconoclast years under Constank. When the Reapers encountered the onslaught from Constank's supporters, they abandoned the Temple World, deeming its defense a futile expenditure of resources. They turned their weapons upon the cities, granting a merciful conclusion to the refugees hiding within. The unyielding wrath of the ecclesiarchy ensured that the chapter faced censure from the High Lords of Terra. The Night Reapers, stripped of their fortress worlds and condemned to a perilous and thankless task, reacted to this punishment with a cold indifference. A decade later, contact with the chapter was lost, and various reports indicated deviations from the Codex Astartes in their doctrines, tactics, and equipment. In the year 989 of the 33rd millennium, the Night Reapers were declared renegades, their involvement in the destruction of Baron Stross Yuen's trade fleet established. This led to a series of raids in which the Reapers played a pivotal role. However, the accusations remained unsubstantiated, and several expeditions sent to investigate disappeared without a trace. In response to the betrayal, the Chameleonic Sons were summoned and dispatched a contingent of 4 households. The Night Reapers intercepted the Loyalists at the Svaga Wells outpost, inflicting significant damage, capturing one strike cruiser, damaging another, and routing the would-be hunters in disgrace. The Reapers explained their failure by claiming that the heretics employed an unknown weapon capable of igniting flames in the atmosphere that bypassed their void shields. This forced the High Lords of Terra to adopt more drastic measures. The Red Templars and Minotaurs, bolstered by substantial fleet support and self-defense forces from nearby sectors, volunteered to eliminate the Night Reapers before they became a rallying point for renegades in such a tumultuous region. It took 3 years of relentless battles to achieve this objective, during which the enemy repeatedly retreated under fire. It soon became apparent that those defying the Emperor's authority had repurposed the Xantho technology of the cursed and dying Karanites, forging alliances with the servants of their arch-enemy. This enabled them to temporarily withstand the onslaught, but the relentless pursuers ultimately drove them into Peru Navigesta, a space wreck predating humanity that had developed a thin atmosphere and parasitic life over centuries. The Night Reapers carved a path kilometers deep into the ancient artificial core of the station in search of a weapon that would rid them of the Imperials. During the climax of the Minotaurs' assault on the orbit of Peru Navigesta, the Grey Knight's strike cruiser, Blade of Equinox, arrived. They entered the engagement zone and commanded the Imperial forces to withdraw. The Minotaurs, however, disregarded the order. This retreat allowed an assault on the depths of the station to commence as the battle raged around them. Suddenly, gigaton explosions erupted, and the cruciform station began to collapse. The destruction of Peru Navigesta resulted in the loss of the entire Grey Knight's extermination team, part of the Minotaurs chapter, as well as severe damage to the Blade of Equinox and the loss of its crew. It is known that Asterion Moloch survived the incident, as he was seen leading the Minotaurs a few months later, while the Aleus chapter maintained a notable silence regarding their losses. In the year 992 of the 41st millennium, the Minotaurs joined the Arpheus War, integrating into the Militaris Tempestus Salvation strike group dispatched to the Arpheus sector to defend remaining controlled territories from the Necron invasion. They suffered heavy losses during the catastrophic battle for the sector capital, Amaru Prime. Adram Malik sensed Ophion's resistance. His fingers struggled to break the pen and cease writing. Evidently, a portion of the memories had been intentionally shielded in the Marine's mind, preventing him from disclosing classified information. Yet this only fueled the sorcerer's curiosity, prompting him to intensify his mental pressure. At last, the psi barriers in the Minotaur's mind shattered, and he resumed writing letter by letter at his previous pace. The word-bearer eagerly immersed himself in the Minotaur's memories, experiencing the events through his perspective. Asterion Moloch quickly realized that competing with the Necrons in terms of firepower, maneuverability and range was tantamount to suicide, and thus ordered a close-quarters assault. He identified the ship Dead Hand, the first to depart the orbit of Amara Prime, and opened fire on the Imperial fleet, sensing that it served as the flagship of the Xenos housing their high commander. Adopting a combat formation reminiscent of a bull's head, the Minotaur's fleet charged headlong into the fray at full speed. As the chapter's warships finally unleashed a torrent of fire from their cannons and plasma batteries, both Necron raiders and damaged Imperial vessels obstructing the path to the Dead Hand came under assault. 2 Necron ships pivoted and retaliated against the advancing Astartes fleet. The battle barge Dodgebury was obliterated by the crossfire of the Necrons. Yet the Minotaurs pressed on, undeterred even as the Dead Hand itself began to return fire. At point-blank range, the Minotaurs launched boarding torpedoes, assault transports, and Conqueror pattern ramships. These vessels collided with the Dead Hand, breaching the flagship's hull, which revealed itself to be a true crypt, filled with stale air, shadowy corridors, and the black coffins of the Xenos. Sinister artificial scarabs skittered about, while wraith-like machines phased through the walls to assail the intruders. The Minotaurs fought fiercely for every inch, yet one by one the Space Marines fell, their Gauss-burned armor proving no protection against the claws of the Wraiths. Ultimately, only one squad remained standing. The Terminator squad, led by Italian, made their way to the vast central chamber of the tomb ship, a cold, oppressive expanse roughly a kilometre wide, situated beneath a dark pyramid. Amid the eerie gloom and enigmatic rings of obelisks stood a colossal dais, atop which loomed the great Necron overlord, clad in a flowing cloak of absolute darkness. This was the last sight Italian's warriors beheld before a phalanx of Praetorians emerged from the shadows, swiftly cutting them down for their audacious intrusion. Yet their sacrifice was not in vain. A signal was sent. Daedalus Ascrata opened fire from its cannons, targeting the coordinates relayed by Italian and breaching the hull of the Dead Hand. A violent decompression erupted within the tomb as air hissed into the void. Like a wounded beast, the Dead Hand retaliated with a laser arc, but the tomb ship's seamless hull had already been breached. Asterion Moloch and 30 of his veteran bodyguards in Terminator armor, alongside 2 hecatons, teleported aboard. Upon spotting the leader of the Necron host, the chapter master raised his black spear and unleashed a laser beam at the sinister figure seated upon the throne-like dais. With a thunderous crash, the Necron leapt from the plinth and immediately struck down the nearest Terminator with a scythe. A fierce battle erupted in the chamber as Praetorians and tomb guards surged forth from the shadows. The Minotaurs found themselves in a precarious predicament, encircled by a ring of enemy warriors tightening around them. Asterion Moloch, filled with cold fury, deflected strikes with his shield while his black spear stabbed and sliced through armoured torsos and severed mechanical limbs. The Dark Lord carved a path through the Minotaurs toward their captain, but looming over him was the formidable dreadnought Girion. Hecaton raised his powerful fist, only for it to clash with the scythe's blade, resulting in an explosion that scattered fragments in all directions. The tomb ship tilted, causing Girion's massive armoured leg to slip and lose its footing. The Necron Lord easily pushed off the floor and lunged at the ancient dreadnought, delivering swift, two-handed strikes from his shoulder with a massive blade, dislodging shards of ceramite and showering sparks from the injured contemptor. The dreadnought fell, its knee joint severed, releasing foul blood and silvery amniotic fluid from cracks in the armour. In that instant, Moloch drove his spear into the Necron's back, piercing through its breastplate. The wounded lord convulsed, his death mask tilting back as though he let out a soundless scream. Using his storm shield, Asterion Moloch forcefully shoved the enemy off his blade as the tomb ship shuddered from fresh impacts. White tongues of plasma flickered around the hole in the ceiling of the sepulchral chamber. Thanks to his warrior instincts, Moloch raised his shield just in time to block a scythe strike that would have decapitated him. Under the relentless, repeated assaults of the Necron's gleaming blade, the shield shattered into pieces. The battlefield spun again, and the combatants momentarily parted. Moloch felt a seething, frigid hatred emanating from the malevolent gaze of the undying entity as the partially dismantled skeletal machine retreated into the shadows. The Minotaur's master was pulled into the void along with the corpses of his fallen warriors. The shattered Dead Hand turned away and accelerated, leaving in its wake the smouldering remains of the battle barge Fidelitas Slamda. Before its destruction, the ship had rammed the Dead Hand, inflicting substantial damage and compelling the colossal starship to withdraw. The Necron armada retreated from the confrontation, leaving nothing but devastation and flames behind. Unexpectedly, the Sunkillers, accompanied by a dozen raiders, detached from the main fleet and landed on the dark side of Orica, while the day side was soon shrouded in ominous storms and pulses of unnatural radiation. Meanwhile, another group of surviving Necron vessels, including the damaged Dead Hand, simply vanished from the augers of the Imperial warships while still operational. As Adram Malek finished reading the thoughts, he glanced over Ophion's shoulder, who continued to inscribe his narrative. The Xenos had not been vanquished, but they were contained. The Orphean line fleet was decimated with less than 10% of its original vessels remaining, each bearing numerous battle scars. The remnants of the armada were merely immense arc-shaped clusters of charred hulls and drifting debris, resembling a funeral pyre for the once glorious defenders of the sector, now visible throughout the star system. Although Amara Prime had expelled the main invasion force, it still burned, having transformed into the graveyard for billions of human souls. Imperial forces withdrew from the ruins to regroup on the outer worlds of Lehman and Kalamar, but the remaining civilian population was unfortunately left to face their fate. The battle for Amara had concluded, yet following the Necron counter-offensive, the Synod, the militant Tempestus, determined that rescuing the Orphean sector required mobilizing forces for a full-scale crusade, a daunting endeavor that would not be feasible for another 30 to 50 years. Consequently, in the year 999 of the 41st millennium, the Orphean Edict was enacted, declaring the Orphean sector of the Segmentum Tempestus lost, nullifying all associated rights, tithes, and designations. Its history would be documented in a secret archive, to be forgotten by all except those tasked with bearing the burden of truth and maintaining vigilance. The Imperial forces still engaged in combat during this time were granted martyrs' deaths, blessed by the Emperor. The Minotaurs, along with the surviving ships of the Orphean fleet, were ordered to carry out exterminatus on all designated worlds in the document, erasing any signs of life from the local planets and reducing significant relics and structures to ruins to prevent future fortifications by enemies. Adram Malek mused on the heavy burden such an order entailed, a mental smirk crossing his face. Indeed, they had suffered defeat. During the Indomitus Crusade in the 42nd millennium, a Minotaur strike force led by Captain Ulrich served within Battle Group Faustus. These Astartes played a crucial role in reclaiming the Bosphor system from the control of the Thousand Suns, with the Minotaurs specifically liberating the Void Docks. However, during the same millennium, an event occurred that would be recorded in Imperial annals as the Defiled Future. The 7th Septic Cohort of the Death Guard launched an assault on the fortress monastery Daedalus Crater. Although the traitors' attack was repelled, Mortarian's sons contaminated the Minotaur's gene seed reserves. Thus began the search for routes to Holy Terra in hopes of accessing stocks of pure gene seed, as the chapter teetered on the brink of extinction. The final campaign of the Minotaurs is considered to be the Hexarchy Rebellion, also in the 42nd millennium. The Hexarchy comprised active and retired Lords of Terra, including those deposed by Guilliman's edict. Upon the Primarch's arrival during the Indomitus Crusade, they resolved to thwart his reforms. The Hexarchy was led by Irtuge Matelion, a former master of the Administratum, and included acting Lords Avelius for Drafmar, Lord Commander Militant Mar of Asheriel, Lord High Admiral Mirel de Pereth, and Grand Master of Assassins Fatik. The members of the Hexarchy commanded the Minotaurs chapter to make their way to the throne world to assist in their conspiracy, while scribes on Terra speculated that the heart of the Imperium was under siege from within. Adram Malek uncovered a fragment of a diary in Ophion's mind, authored by a woman named Aleia. It seemed she belonged to the Silent Sisterhood, and had encountered the Minotaurs during that conflict. The sorcerer delved deeper into her memories. I hold only fleeting fragments of those tense moments, but I distinctly remember the scent of the Space Marines. The Black Legionnaires aboard the Vessel of Spite reeked of decay, exuding a foulness akin to liquid filth. In contrast, the Minotaurs emitted a different aroma, something charred, reminiscent of burnt flesh or scorched metal. While not as repugnant as that of the traitors, the scent was sharp and acrid, provoking an uncomfortable prickling in the nose. The 10 Minotaurs sent to confront us unleashed a barrage of las bolts. Most of the Space Marines wielded bladed weapons and bolt pistols, with 2 wielding chainswords and another pair brandishing crackling power fists. Their bronze and black armor closely mirrored our own, albeit significantly larger. We were like fleeting shadows. They resembled the very bones of the Earth's crust. Suddenly a ceramite shard flaked off one Minotaur's armor. His fist swept past me, prompting me to lean away, twist, dash aside, and spin for another strike. The Space Marine charged at me. I had to avoid creating too much distance, lest I grant him the opportunity to fire his bolt pistol. Thus I took a small step back, twirled my sword, and lunged forward. The weapon pierced something, perhaps the entry point of a cable, but it failed to penetrate deeply. I never saw the blow that struck me. The Minotaur either concealed it or executed it with such swiftness that I couldn't react. I lack the words to adequately describe the sensation of a blow delivered by a space marine whose fist is enveloped in rending energy and fueled by boundless rage. Darkness, edged with blood-red hues, clouded my vision, and suddenly I lost all sense of gravity and spatial orientation. Initially, I experienced a vague feeling of weightlessness before realizing I was tumbling through the air, followed by a jarring crunch as I collided with a column several meters away from the combat site. Somehow I managed to retain my grip on my sword. Struggling to rise to my feet and brace myself for the inevitable assault, my vision swam, but fragmented images of the battle flickered in my mind. Irinia unleashing a barrage of strikes against the Minotaur, her swordsmanship astonishing. Talisha engaging the enemy at almost point-blank range with her combat blade. Lysel sprawled on the ground, her armor riddled with craters from bolter fire. Then everything dissolved into a golden wave. I am ready to acknowledge this, gritting my teeth. The custodians entering the fray were awe-inspiring. They fought with the same silence we did, eschewing battle cries or challenges. Silver flames danced along the custodians' blades as their bolters unleashed a torrent of fiery rounds upon the space marines. I could barely discern the warriors clad in golden armor, as they moved with such speed that they appeared more as blurred streaks of energy than beings confined by the laws of matter. The custodians were fierce, ruthless, and perfect. Struggling to clear my mind, I staggered toward the conflict. The Minotaur who had felled me was now grappling with a custodian, and the torn shoulder pad adorned with the bull's head revealed pale, bone-white skin. With a powerful fist, he struck the custodian, and a blinding flash erupted as the two warriors clashed, their disintegration fields colliding. The custodian's spear sliced through the Minotaur's chest plate, but the space marine pressed forward. He fired at point-blank range with his bolt pistol, and the round gouged a furrow in the custodian's pauldron. Amidst the smoke and rising dust, the silhouette of a second Minotaur emerged, opening fire with a bolter. I leapt, closing the distance between us, and rejoined the fray. My thoughts remained tangled, and my limbs did not obey me well. Nonetheless, I managed to throw the space marine off balance and thwart his strike. He pressed the bolter's barrel against my neck, but I twisted away just in time. The round that zipped past me slammed into the wall behind and detonated. With a counter-thrust, I drove my sword into the knee joint of his armor, though a retaliatory kick from his other leg sent me crashing to the ground. I felt the Minotaur raise his sabaton to crush me with all his strength. I rolled aside, curling into a ball before springing back to my feet. My adversary pursued me, unleashing another volley of bolts. I dodged to the side, but one round struck my shoulder pad. I crashed against the stone wall with a resounding crunch, blood splattering inside my helmet. Despite the pain, I swiftly twisted around, gripping my sword with both hands. I had to close the distance rapidly, otherwise the bolter would finish me off. Evading the incoming shots, I advanced on the Space Marine and delivered an upward strike. The Minotaur raised his bolter to deflect my blade, narrowly preventing it from severing his neck. My weapon, Somnus, sliced through his firearm, and its internal mechanisms erupted in a shower of sparks. My next strike targeted the Minotaur's chest, but he seized my sword with his free hand, crushing the metal in his grip. In a conventional duel, such a maneuver might have worked. However, the ancient monomolecular blade effortlessly cleaved through the ceramite, allowing me to wrench my weapon from the Minotaur's grasp, severing several of his fingers in the process. Blood spattered across his visor, and I spun around, gathering speed and momentum. The Minotaur swung the butt of his bolter toward my face, but I was faster. Somnus whistled as it cleaved through the Space Marine's helmet. I saw fragments of bone and flesh flying through the air, along with the shattered dome of his helmet, exposing his skin and cerebral matter. The massive armored form began to topple forward, threatening to crush me beneath its weight. I barely managed to leap back before the lifeless body crashed to the floor. Gasping for breath, I knelt and raised my sword, prepared to face the next foe. Yet it was over. The storm of unbridled fury had subsided. Even the demigods in this hall seemed unable to maintain such intensity. The conspirators' coup attempt collapsed when it was revealed that Fadix's allegiance to the Hexarchy had been a ruse all along. When the Grand Master of Assassins signalled that one of the Hexarchy's members had fallen to well-placed Imperial assassins under Fadix's command, Adram Malek sensed an approaching presence and managed to whisper a protective mandala just before the second Minotaur named Navkrak appeared. Upon witnessing the towering word-bearer looming over Ophion, the warrior silently fired several shots, but all the bolts detonated against the psychic barrier before the shooter retreated. Ophion dropped his quill, his body contorting in spasms, limbs twisting at unnatural angles as his head jerked back. 2 pairs of clawed arms erupted from his ribs, and black horns sprouted from the sides of his helmet. The creature resembled the very monster depicted in their heraldry. "I need him alive," commanded Adram Malek, gesturing toward the exit. Less than an hour later, the newly transformed Minotaur returned with a barely conscious Navkrak. However, when Adram Malek attempted to seize his head to extract his thoughts, the Minotaur unclenched his palm, revealing a grenade. The explosion scattered the remnants of both Minotaurs throughout the chamber. The sorcerer managed to shield himself under a protective field. "Fool, you've merely complicated my task, but not rendered it impossible," he remarked as he approached the shattered remains of Navkrak. Homophagy was not his preferred method for extracting information, but sometimes it was necessary. A torrent of alien memories surged into Malik's mind, which he needed to sift through to glean information about the chapter's heroes. He approached the parchment and concentrated on the image that surfaced in his mind. A space marine engulfed in flames of wrath, clad in Tartaros-patterned Terminator armor, bearing a heraldic shield adorned with a red bull's head and wielding a relic weapon known as the Black Spear. Without question, this was Asterion Moloch, the chapter master, known as Satra Abdedallah Skrata, the bringer of wrath and spear of justice. A veteran of countless battles, most of his body had been replaced with cybernetic implants, and his rage and fury alone allowed him to disregard mortal wounds. He was a brutal tactician, reveling in the annihilation of foes and embodying the grim reputation of the chapter. His name had become synonymous with slaughter in the Emperor's honor across numerous worlds. Typically, he could be found at the forefront of battle, leading the Terminators through enemy lines. Outside of combat, Moloch occupied the heart of the labyrinthine halls aboard the heavy assault ship Daedalus Kratar, seated upon a bronze throne surrounded by information relays, servitors, and casualty reports, meticulously weighing the costs of blood spilled in pursuit of strategic objectives. Asterion Moloch's character and history remain largely enigmatic to those outside his inner circle, even among the ranks of the Inquisition and military command, where only the highest officials have glimpsed the truth. The accounts of his deeds are cloaked in mystery, speculation, and contradiction. What can be stated with certainty is that Asterion is a formidable warrior, having personally vanquished several chapter masters of traitorous factions, as well as numerous Orc war bosses, Xenos Corsair leaders, and champions of the Dark Gods. Following the conflict at Armata Prime, there was a period during which Moloch was presumed dead, a belief that has echoed through at least 6 other recorded instances over the past 5 centuries where the chapter master was thought lost, only to resurface later. This recurring pattern, combined with the Minotaur's secretive nature and the extensive cybernetic enhancements Moloch has undergone, has led some to speculate disturbingly that, over the centuries, Asterion Moloch may not be a single space marine, but rather a succession of individuals, each inheriting not only his name and armor, but also an assigned identity along with the memories of his predecessors. The sorcerer turned his attention to the second figure standing beside Asterion. Though less radiant, it exuded a calm deliberation rather than aggression. This was Reclusiarch Ivanus Encomi, known as the Eye of the Chapter. An accomplished tactician and skilled commander, he played a pivotal role in the Minotaur's offensives across several key engagements. He led a successful boarding action against the Weeping Rose strike cruiser, the Dawn Reaper, during the disastrous battle at Abta, and directed the chapter's forces in the assault on Shapriaz. Yet Ivanus's true expertise shone where Asterion Moloch might falter. during loyalist war councils where he represented the Minotaurs throughout the Badab War. The reclusiarch exhibited an unusual restraint and silence for one of his chapter. While representatives of other factions engaged in heated discussions and strategizing, Ivanus Enkomi remained observant, meticulously assessing each contribution. His stern gaze overlooked very little, and his visage, adorned with purple tattoos and framed by red irises, betrayed his origins from a harsh and desolate feral world. However, when he spoke, the facade of the savage faded away, revealing an intellect of extraordinary caliber. In the realm of rhetoric, he proved himself a peer of the finest demagogues of the ecclesiarchy. Sergeant Vigilator Hamat Kratos served as the deputy commander of the 9th Reserve Company of the Minotaurs. His ascent through the ranks was rapid, demonstrating exceptional combat prowess and remarkable proficiency with all manner of ballistic weaponry. He established himself as a calculating and ruthless leader with a keen instinct for battle. His combat achievements earned him both early leadership opportunities and access to advanced armaments from the chapter's arsenal. During the Orphean War, Kratos distinguished himself in engagements against Xenos corsairs. Upon receiving command of a company tasked with securing a refueling station at Attendum, he devised a cunning strategy using the outpost's workers and servitors as bait, herding them into the central area of the oil refinery. Lured by the enticing promise of flesh, blood and souls, the Drukhari corsairs launched an assault on what seemed to be a poorly defended refuge. As the dark, soul-hungry invaders allowed their eagerness to overpower their caution, Kratos and his Minotaurs emerged from their hiding spots, launching a meticulously planned ambush on the Xenos. In the ensuing 3-hour firefight, more than 200 Cabalites fell to their onslaught. The operation was executed with such precision that civilian casualties were notably lower than anticipated, with only 6 out of 10 civilians losing their lives during the engagement. Captain Tull first gained notoriety during the Badab War, where he personally accounted for 67 enemy combatants. By the time the Orphean War arrived, he had established himself as a seasoned sergeant within the vanguard and received orders to lead 5 squads of Minotaurs against the Xenos horde in an operation on Tamaris. Their mission was to assault the reawakening tomb of the Maynarch dynasty. Tull distinguished himself as a decisive leader, and although the Inquisition forces faced defeat, several Necron tombs were successfully neutralized. Upon his promotion to captain, he took command of a battle group and aided Inquisitor Caspiel Rex in repelling a Black Legion assault on the hive world of Crixos. Hecaton Iacos, known as the Watcher of Daedal Scrat and the Terra of Bifrost, is a Contemptor-class dreadnought. Unfortunately, the identity of the warrior entombed within the sarcophagus remains a mystery. However, the heraldic symbols adorning his armor reveal his participation in the battle within the Aptera system, the ordnance of the strike cruiser Mater Suspiria from the Mourners, and his defense of the Black Gates of Hive Vitria against the Gin-Stealer cult. Moreover, he played a prominent role on the planet Renegade 2.19 during the Bifrost Uprising. In this engagement, Brother Sergeant Augustine of the Chapter of Vipers mistakenly opened fire on the blood-soaked Minotaur's dreadnought. Enraged, Iacos broke through Imperial defences, slaying 37 Huskarls and Augustine himself, and dismantling a Lehman Russ tank that attempted to halt his advance. Only a command from Asterion Moloch, transmitted over Vox, was able to quell the dreadnought's rampage. Despite his formidable strength and battle experience, his fellow warriors regarded him with cold indifference, a sentiment they shared towards all Hecatons of the chapter. As Adram Malek completed his writing, he acknowledged that this was the final record of the cursed founding he was familiar with. Carefully, he rolled up the scroll and placed it on the shelf. Much work remained in repairing the ship, for he now fully comprehended the fury faced by those who encountered the Minotaurs. A confrontation with a small detachment of these frenzied berserkers had resulted in the near-total loss of the crew and the death of Shudamel. The ship's hull would require extensive time to mend. Although the wounds of the Well of All Worlds were slowly healing, he would have to set aside any thoughts of navigating the warp for the time being.